Good evening, everyone. We want to welcome you to the Keller ISD Financial Aid and FAFSA Night. We're very happy that you could join us this evening, and we hope that you find the information delivered tonight to be very helpful and informative. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce our guest speakers. We're very happy to have representatives from UT Arlington with us tonight. First, we have Mania Patia. She's a financial aid counselor at UTA. Next, we have Sandra Escobar, who is the Assistant Director of Admissions. Welcome, ladies. It's great to have you both join us tonight. In addition to these ladies, we also have several student mentors from UTA here to help answer any questions our viewers may have about financial aid and the FAFSA. These mentors help our coaches in our newly established college, career, and military readiness centers that we now have on each of our high school campuses. We feel very fortunate to have their help. Now, I would like to introduce our district people that we have here tonight. Randy Colvin is our CCMR coach at Keller High School. Lindsay Hernandez is our CCMR coach at at Timber Creek High School. And Paul Higgins is the CCMR coach at Fossil Ridge. Brenna Williamson is the coach at Central High School, but she couldn't be with us tonight, but her contact information will be given at the end of the presentation. Finally, I am Marcia Cummins, the District College and Career Readiness Counselor. I'm about to turn it over to Mania, who will explain all about financial aid and the FAFSA. As you watch the presentation, you are welcome to put your questions in the chat box, and we will do our best to answer them after her presentation. If we run out of time before your question is answered, we will be sending out a Q&A document of tonight's questions to everyone who registered and provided their email address. So if you haven't done that yet, please do so. You can find the link to the Google form in the chat box to the right of your screen. Tonight's presentation is also being recorded and will be available for viewing again or later on the CCMR YouTube channel, which will be linked from the district CCMR webpage. So without further ado, I will now turn it over to Mania.
Hello, everyone. Let me know if you can't hear me. My name is Mania, and I am with the UTA Office of Financial Aid. Today, I'm going to be doing a presentation on federal financial aid. So I'm going to be talking about your federal financial aid that you can receive as far as applying, the awards that you might receive through the schools, and basically I'll be going over on the FAFSA application and your cost of attendance and other important information for the federal aid application process. Again, my name is Mania Patia. I am a financial aid counselor here at the UTA Office of Financial Aid. A little bit of what I do is I do a lot of award processing. So I award students federal financial aid. I answer their questions about their FAFSA, about their specific awards, and just generally interacting with students on a daily basis in regards to the FAFSA, which is what I'll be talking to you guys about today. I have my email address on this presentation. So at the end, you can always email me at mania.patia@uta.edu. And if you've already been admitted to UTA, you can include your 1000 number and I can answer all your questions via email too. But again, we will be taking questions at the end of this presentation. Here at UTA, we consider college an investment in your future. So regardless of your educational goals, whether you want to be an engineer, a nurse, a doctor, or just you want to major in basket weaving, underwater basket weaving, it's definitely up to you. But we do have aid available to help you fund your education. And I'm going to be talking more about that. But before I get started about the federal aid application process, I do want to talk about who we are here at UTA. Our core value here at UTA is diversity. We have students from varied backgrounds who are majoring in various, one of our majors, we are the sixth highest diversity ranked university in the nation, and we have over 300 student organizations on our campus. So here you can really tailor your experience into what your interests are. There's different things that you can do on and off campus in the Arlington community. We have over 29,000 undergraduate students, and you can interact with all of these students either on campus or off campus, or of course, due to COVID, online. And you can make friends, you can make like closer families, and there's just a variety of people that you can meet here, from administrators to classmates to professors who you can basically make part of your life. And we also have over 60,000 students in all of our programs combined, which includes our online programs. So there's definitely plenty of people for you to meet here and to get to know. We also have the options for students to live on campus. So if you just want to roll out of bed and go straight to class, or if you want to live off campus and drive to school, there's definitely different options for you. We have a lot of places where you can live, and it's a great place to be here at UTA. And of course, we are #1 in Texas for veterans. To help you pay to go to school here at UTA, and also for any other university you want to attend, there is financial aid available. Here at UTA, over 70% of our students receive some type of financial aid. And last year, we awarded over 500 million in federal financial aid, or all other types of funding that we have available to students. So there's definitely help out here for you. You'll just have to apply for it. Like I said earlier, college is an investment, and there is a cost associated with that investment. So here at UTA, we have what is known as estimated cost of attendance, a COA, or also known as the budget. All of those terms mean the same thing. They refer to the general cost of what it will cost to attend UTA. So that includes tuition and fees, books and supplies, housing and meals, transportation, and personal and miscellaneous expenses. Every school that you apply to will have a cost of attendance that you can look at and compare with other universities. So I encourage every one of you guys to go to the website of the schools that you plan on applying to and look at the cost of attendance to get a general sense of what it will take for you to be able to attend and what kind of aid you may receive at that school. So the cost of attendance, it is just an estimate. This is not the actual amount that you will have to pay in order to attend school. It is just a guideline that is used in order to give you an idea of what you may pay. For example, for books and supplies here for this academic year, we have the cost of attendance for that specific amount, for that specific item, as $1,206. That does not mean that you're going to be paying $1,206 for your books. So if you go to Thrift Books, or you go to Amazon, or you rent your books, that can be reduced as far as your expenses for books and supplies. So again, this is just a general estimate on what it will cost. And we always encourage students to reduce their expenses as much as possible. And if you can live with your parents, that would be ideal in order to reduce your housing and meals. However, if you do live on campus, your housing and meals could either be higher or lower depending on where you live. So always look at your actual expenses, get in contact with the various offices, whether it's the the housing office, so you can see how much it'll cost to live on campus or off campus in apartments, just to get a general sense of what it will cost for you to attend any university that you apply to. Again, all universities have a cost of attendance that it can provide on how much it'll cost to attend their specific universities. And another thing I want to mention is the cost of attendance is used in the process of awarding federal financial aid. So when we are going through the awarding process, we do take your cost of attendance into consideration. All right, so let's get into how you actually get federal financial aid. The first step in receiving federal financial aid is submitting what is known as the FAFSA. Most of you probably heard of the FAFSA. It stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid, and you can apply online at studentaid.gov. That is where you will submit your FAFSA. For the FAFSA, you can qualify for grants, loans, and any other types of aid that your school offers. And most schools in Texas have a priority deadline of January 15, 2021. So this priority date is what we use to determine your maximum eligibility for grant funding. So grants are free money. So we always encourage students to submit your FAFSA to every school that you are interested in by that January 15th deadline, ideally submitted before. And also you need to be admitted into your program, submit all documentation, and making sure that everything is in order for you to be awarded the maximum amount of grant funding that you are eligible to receive. Now, if you submit your FAFSA after January 15th, does that mean that you won't get any financial aid? No, you can still receive federal financial aid funding after January 15th. It'll just be based on the amount of funding they have at the time that they received your application. So it might not be the maximum amount, you might receive less. So of course we want to maximize the amount of free money that we receive. So always keep that January 15th, 2021 priority deadline in the back of your head when you're submitting your FAFSA to your various schools. You can submit the FAFSA on studentaid.gov, as I said previously, and you can use a tool, what is known as the IRS data retrieval tool. This tool, it transfers your 2019 tax information directly to your 2021-2022 FAFSA. So the 2021-2022 FAFSA uses that 2019 1040 tax return in order to help calculate what is known as your expected family contribution that we use to award you. For the IRS data retrieval tool, not everyone is able to use it, unfortunately. However, you can manually enter the information on the FAFSA itself. So you can go through step by step on each FAFSA, and it'll tell you exactly where on your 1040 tax return you need to go in order to fill out that specific question that they're asking you. And again, it is for the 2019 tax return year, not 2018, not 2017, specifically 2019. The FAFSA did open up on October 1st of 2020, so it's currently available for you guys to submit. And at the end of this presentation, we'll take some of your questions about the FAFSA, and if you want to start completing it, we can also help you with that too. The first step before you're able to complete the FAFSA is creating what is known as an FSA ID. An FSA ID stands for Federal Student Aid, and this is how you electronically sign your FAFSA. Both the parent and the student need to create their own FSA ID and passport. So you can create it on studentaid.gov, or you can go to fsaid.ed.gov. Those are both websites that will take you directly to where the link will take you directly to where you can create your FSA ID. And the main information that you'll need is your social security number, and all that. The rest of the information is pretty straightforward, like your name, your date of birth, and all of that other kinds of good stuff. So FSA ID is the first step before you can start the FAFSA application. Once you create your FSA ID, you enter your tax information and you submit the FAFSA to the Department of Education. They will calculate what is known as an expected family contribution, or EFC. You will hear this term a lot, and it is very important. The EFC is the amount your family can reasonably contribute to your college education. So this is not how much you will be charged or your family will be charged to attend university. This is just a number that is used to calculate your eligibility for federal grant funding, federal loans, or any type of state grant funding also. So this stays the same regardless of which college you apply to. So whether you apply to UTA, UT Austin, UT El Paso, it does not matter. They will all receive your same EFC number that is calculated by the FAFSA. There are two main components of your expected family contribution. There's the parent contribution, which is based on the parent's tax information, and the student contribution, which is based on the student's tax information. And all the other data that you put in your FAFSA, all of that is used to calculate your EFC. And in general, the lower the EFC number, the more likely you'll receive grants. And the higher the EFC number, the less likely you'll receive grants. However, even if you think your EFC is going to be too high based on your family income, we do encourage you to submit your FAFSA because there might still be other types of awards that you may be eligible for that you might not have otherwise known without submitting that FAFSA. So we always encourage students of every income to submit the FAFSA, and so we can get that EFC calculated and we can determine your eligibility for federal financial aid funding. Once you submit the FAFSA, the Department of Education will process it. And unfortunately, 1 out of every 3 FAFSA applicants are selected for a process called verification. Verification is the process by which the school that you're applying to has to make sure that the information on your FAFSA is correct. So the school will request additional documentation from you in order to make sure that the information you submitted on your FAFSA is correct. Every school that you apply to where you're selected for verification, they will notify you if you are one of their students that have been selected. So check your school email, check your school portal, check your mailbox, and make sure that you have not received any notification from the school letting you know that you need additional documentation. This is very important because this can delay the aid that you receive. So, because without verification being completed, the school cannot award you any federal financial aid. And that goes for all schools, whether in Texas or out of state, they won't be able to award you any federal financial aid without verification being completed. And verification can take several weeks to process. And that's why we recommend that you submit these documents as soon as possible. And that also ties into our priority deadline of January 15th, which will give you plenty of time to turn in all verification documents that you need to if you submit your FAFSA prior to that deadline. Also, with the IRS data retrieval tool that we talked about earlier, it will reduce your chances of being selected for verification. That's why we highly encourage you guys, if it is available to you, to use that data retrieval tool. Now we know that all parents and students, the situations don't always stay the same. So we have what is known as special circumstance forms. So students can submit this form to their school's financial aid office in order to have their FAFSA reviewed for their specific extenuating circumstance. For example, if you or your parents experience a loss or change of employment, a death of a parent or spouse, a divorce, separation, loss of benefits, and any extenuating medical circumstances, you can submit this special circumstance form to the school so that they can review your specific situation. One of the biggest special circumstance that we had for this current academic year was COVID-19. So that was a situation where students can submit this special circumstance form and have their FAFSA reviewed And some students were eligible for additional grant funding based on the special circumstance form. So this is a very important form to keep in mind if your circumstances have changed. And we always recommend that you contact the schools that you have applied to and let them know if something has changed, and just send an email, say, hey, this is what's going on. Will I be able to submit this special circumstance form? And they will let you know what your options will be. So this is one of the ways where if the FAFSA is not accurately reflecting your current situation, you can have that specific circumstance reviewed and potentially get additional funding. Sorry, everyone. So now we're getting into the different types of financial aid that are available. There are two main types of aid. There's gift aid, which does not require any repayment, meaning it's just free money like scholarships and grants. And then we have self-help aid, which is your federal student loans, which requires you to pay it back, and your federal work study, where you have to be employed in order to receive it. Specific programs that are gift aid are our federal Pell Grant program, our FSEOG program, and our federal work study. So we use a lot of acronyms in financial aid because some of these grants are a mouthful. Like FSEOG stands for Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, and these are through the federal government. However, there are institutional and or state grants. So the MAP grant is an institutional grant that is only offered by UTA. Different schools have different institutional grants. So we recommend you contact these schools and ask them about their specific grant funding that they may offer you. The Texas Public Education Grant, or TPEC, it's a state grant through the state of Texas. So most schools in Texas will offer the Texas Public Education Grant. And there is also a state work study that some students are eligible for through the state of Texas. These are all need-based programs, which goes back to your EFC. So the lower your EFC is, the more likely you'll qualify for these specific grant programs. And the higher the EFC, the less likely you'll qualify for these state grant program. So you can always check with your schools that you're applying to and ask them about your specific eligibility for these awards, and they'll be able to let you know whether or not you're eligible, or kind of give you an explanation on how you can basically become eligible for these grant funding. One of our most popular state grant programs here that we offer at UTA and other four-year institutions is called the Texas Grant Program. You have to be enrolled in a four-year university in order to receive the Texas grant. So unfortunately, community colleges do not offer the Texas Grant Program. Only four-year institutions offer this program. You also have to be enrolled within 16 months of graduating from a Texas high school. So if you take a year off from school, you still have the opportunity for being considered for the Texas grant once you do decide to attend school, but it has to be within 16 months of graduating from high school. Another criteria is you have to be in at least 9 credit hours once you are enrolled before you can receive the Texas grant. You will need to be registered for selective service or be exempt from that program. And you also have to be eligible for need-based aid based on your cost of attendance and your expected family contribution. And an example is for this current academic year, 2020-2021, we prioritize students who had an EFC of 6,047 or less for the Texas grant. For the Texas grant program. So students who had that EFC or less were most likely awarded this Texas grant if they were eligible. And you also need to be classified as a Texas resident and have not been convicted of a felony or crime involving a controlled substance during the award year. So if you want more information on this Texas grant program, you can go to www.collegeforalltexans.com, and they'll have way more information, especially if you are planning on transferring from a community college. You may still be eligible for this program, but there's different eligibility requirements. So you can go to collegeforalltexans.com, and it'll give you more details about that. We also have aid available for our DACA or undocumented students, and it is called TASFA. TASFA stands for Texas Application for State Financial Aid. Unfortunately, not all schools in Texas are offer the TASFA to their students. So you will need to contact each school for information about whether or not they offer the TASFA. And UTA does offer the TASFA here. It is a paper application. So you will need to print out the TASFA, complete it, and then submit it to the specific schools that you want to apply to. And specifically here at UTA, you have to submit it with your tax return or tax transcripts to our office. And funds are very limited for FAFSA just in general. So turn in your application as soon as possible, ideally before the January 15, 2021 deadline. So if you submit it after that deadline, you may be awarded for the TASFA, but it'll be based on the funding that they have available. And again, TASFA is very limited, so we always encourage students always submit it as soon as possible to all the schools that you're applying to so that you can be considered for those funds. You can also find the TASFA applications online on our website at uta.edu/FAO, or you can again go to collegeforalltexans.com and they have the TASFA application there available for you to print out and complete. Here at UTA, the TASFA is awarded through our Texas Grant Program. So if you're eligible for the TASFA, then you'll most likely eligible for the Texas Grant. And that's how we award our students here as far as TASFA goes. Different schools have different way that they fund TASFA. So you will need to ask the specific school that you're applying to how you would receive those funds. Federal student loans are also another way for students to help fund their education. Through the Department of Education, there are two main types of student loans. There's the subsidized loan and there's the unsubsidized loan. The main difference between the two loans is that the subsidized loan is interest-free while you're in school, while the unsubsidized loan accrues interest as soon as you receive it. So in general, we always recommend that students take out the subsidized loan before taking out the unsubsidized loan. And of course, if you need both, go ahead and take them. We always encourage responsible borrowing, but if you need it, then go ahead and take it just so that you are not struggling to pay for your education. There's a specific interest rate for both of those loans. They're all the same, except it does change every year. For this current year, our interest rate is 2.75%, and it's a fixed interest rate for the specific loan. Again, it can change next year. It is set by Congress, so those rates can vary by each academic year. Also, with federal loans, you don't have to repay them until after you graduate from school or drop below half time. So these loans, they are basically in a period where you don't have to repay them until after you graduate in general. And that's what most students do. So these have very good terms and conditions for students, and because you don't have to pay them until 6 months after you graduate. So you are given some time to repay these loans after you finish your degree program. And something else my coworker usually says is that if you don't get a nickel in scholarships or a penny in grants, we will award you federal loans. Federal loans are the main type of loans that we award students who are not eligible for our other types of funding. So they are our least popular types of federal financial aid, but they do help a lot of students as far as funding their education if they don't qualify for anything else. Important things to remember. So for the FAFSA and TASFA, they all became available on October 1st. So keep that date in mind. October, it's already October, so these are already available for you to complete. You can go ahead and do it as soon as you can. We always encourage you to do it before the January 15th deadline. The earlier, the better. And submit your application to the schools that you want to receive it, and so they can process it, and so that you're ready to be awarded once your school starts that awarding process. And complete any verification if you're chosen for it. watch out for emails from the school. They will let you know if you are selected for verification. So keep that in mind once you receive your student email, you receive your student portal, to be looking out for any notification about verification, because you do want to complete that as soon as possible. You also need to be admitted into your university. So whichever university you apply to, you will need to be admitted before they can award you. So always submit your admissions applications and all they need in order for you to get admitted into that school, and keep in contact with admissions and financial aid just to make sure all of your processing is going smoothly. Financial aid will disperse 10 days before courses begin, and any financial aid that is in excess, you will receive it in the form of a refund so you can cover your other educational expenses. And that's just in general through all financial aid programs, and you'll hear this a lot. 10 days before your classes begin is when you can start receiving your financial aid. So keep that in mind when you're planning your classes. Another important component of financial aid is satisfactory academic progress. Every student applying for federal financial aid must meet certain academic standards, and these academic standards include minimum PACE, minimum cumulative GPA, and minimum maximum time frame. These are all important in determining whether or not you are eligible for federal financial aid. So there's a specific GPA that you have to maintain, and there's a certain percentage of your classes that you have to complete, and you have to complete a certain amount of credit hours before you will have to what is known as appeal for financial aid. So if you are not meeting any of these components of satisfactory academic progress, you will have to submit what is known as a satisfactory academic progress appeal, where the school will review your appeal that you submit and determine whether or not they can award you federal financial aid. If you are approved, they will award you the financial aid. However, if you're denied, then unfortunately, you will need to find another way of funding that specific school year or that specific semester. Every school does satisfactory academic progress differently. For example, here at UTA, we review satisfactory academic progress once an academic year. Some schools review satisfactory academic progress every single semester. So always follow up with the school that you are applying to and try to figure out what their staff policies are, just so that you make sure that you are maintaining it and you don't lose your eligibility for federal financial aid. Okay, so everyone's favorite part of this presentation is our academic scholarships. Here at UTA, we do have academic scholarships for incoming freshmen. These are our general scholarships. So we have our National Merit Scholarship, our Maverick Academic Scholarship, our Presidential Honor Scholars, and our Presidential Scholar Scholarship. These are for incoming freshmen only. So you will need to be admitted by the deadline on those scholarships in order to be considered. Your application is your admission. So you need to be admitted into the university by those deadlines for us to consider you for those scholarships. And for transfer students, we do have the transfer scholarship, and you would have to also be admitted by that transfer scholarship deadline that's listed on the screen and also on our website. And these are, I would say, always please keep in mind the deadlines for these scholarships, not just at UTA, but at any school that you apply for, because these are the cutoffs for these scholarships. Most schools don't really consider students who apply after the deadline. So if you do apply after the deadline, you will just have to contact the school and see if they'll consider you. However, here at UTA, we are pretty strict about those deadlines. So keep it in mind when you're applying for scholarships, for our general scholarships here at UTA and any other school that you are also applying to. We also have what is known as Mass Scholarship here at UTA, which is our general scholarship portal. So once you are admitted into UTA, you will have access to the Mass Scholarship. And what it is it'll basically tailor the scholarships that we have available here at UTA to your specific information on our My Math Student portal. So whether whatever type of major you are, you will see scholarships based on that major and that you may be eligible to receive. So it's a very handy tool for students who may not have received our general scholarships. It does not mean that you cannot receive other types of scholarships. There are ways to receive other scholarships that are not just the general incoming scholarships. And a lot of schools have general scholarship applications. So again, contact those schools and find out what their general scholarship applications are and what is their criteria for you to be able to apply to those scholarships. And they'll be able to let you know that also. A lot of students also receive outside scholarships, whether through their community service center, through their parents' employer. There's just different outside scholarships out there for you guys to receive additional funding. However, before we can process these outside scholarships here at UTA, you have to submit what is known as an outside scholarship provider information form. And this form will allow us to process the scholarships that the donor sends to our office. So this form goes to the donor who's giving you that scholarship so that they send it to us and we can process it for you. Again, every school has different processes for their outside scholarships. So reach out to them and ask them what that process is so they can get that scholarship added to your student account and so that your disbursement of the scholarship is not delayed before classes begin. All right, everyone, this is the end of this presentation. Here's our contact information. So if you guys have any questions, you can contact us at our financial aid office via phone, or you can find the rest of our contact information on our website. Unfortunately, it's not on the screen. We have our scholarship office, their phone number and their email, and our Veteran Affairs office. We also are on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We're always constantly updating our social media accounts with information about financial aid and UTA. So add us at UTA FAO, okay? Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Mania. That was very informative. Thank you for sharing all of that. And at this time, we're going to start answering some of the questions that have already come in. So I think that Lindsay Hernandez, who is our CCMR coach at Timber Creek, is going to start us off with some of the questions that have come in. And so I just want to encourage any of our coaches or any of our UTA representatives that are here tonight to jump in and answer the questions. Thanks.
All right, the first question we have, do you already need to have a school picked out before you can start the application?
No, you do not need to have a school picked out to start the FAFSA application. You can begin it without adding a school. However, you won't be able to submit the FAFSA without adding at least one school code before you submit the application. So you can start it, but you can't submit it without having a school.
Mania, how many schools can you add for the FAFSA? We get that question a lot.
Yeah, of course. You can add up to 10 schools on the FAFSA. I wish we could add more, but unfortunately, that's the limit.
All right, next question. Besides financial aid loans, is this also linked to scholarship offers in some way?
Yeah, so with the FAFSA, there are some scholarships that you apply to that are need-based. So one of the criteria of the scholarship would be to have a FAFSA on file. So yes, there are scholarships that require you to have the FAFSA before that they can determine your eligibility for that scholarship.
And we have another question. Somebody just said, just not sure what I need this for. What would you say to that person?
Of course. So with the FAFSA, that is how we award you federal financial aid. And without it being submitted, we cannot give you any of the funding that you may be eligible to receive. A lot of students, they think their income may be too high or their parents make too much money in order for them to be eligible for federal financial aid. And that sometimes is not the case, but you won't be able to set
up a separate account for my son.
Of course. So for your son, you and your son can create a FSA ID for him by going to studentaid.gov, and you can click on create a new account, and you can enter his information, and that way he can create his own FSA ID, and he'll be able to sign into to complete the FAFSA with that FSA ID and password that he creates.
Thank you. Next question. I am divorced. Which income tax info should be utilized for the FAFSA? If you have not filed your 2019 taxes yet, can you use the 2018 tax return? So I guess it's a two-part question.
Yeah, of course. It depends on your specific situation. So if you're divorced, you would enter the the 2019 tax information for the parent who the student lived with most in the past 12 months. And that parent's tax information will be the only one that is included in the FAFSA. If that parent is either remarried, then they will include their tax information and their new spouse's tax information. And for the other question,
Yeah, do you use the 2019 return or 2018 return?
you would use the 2019 tax return information.
Oh, sorry. Let me correct that. If you have not filed your 2019 tax return, do you use the 2018? So I guess it was the prior year.
Yeah, so you will still need to use your 2019 tax information. Unfortunately, you won't be able to use the 2018. So your option would be to either file your taxes for 2019 or indicate on the FAFSA that you will file, and then enter your tax information based on like your W-2s or any other tax document that you may have for that specific year, since you have not filed yet. But you would have to indicate on the FAFSA that you will file, and then submit the information based on like your W-2s for 2019.
Thank you.
So we have another question. Someone asks, how do I apply for scholarships with FAFSA?
Yeah, of course. So FAFSA is not an application for scholarships. It's just that some scholarships are need-based, so they require you to have the FAFSA. So you're not necessarily applying for a scholarship with the FAFSA. It's just some scholarships require you to have the FAFSA as part as them determining your eligibility for it. So always submit the FAFSA in case you come across a scholarship that requires it as part of one of its eligibility criteria.
Thank you.
All right, next question. We moved to the United States last year. We have our taxes filed only for 1 year. Would that be a problem?
It depends on the year that you have your taxes filed for. If you have your taxes filed for 2019, then it's not going to be an issue. But if you don't have your taxes for 2019, then you will have to indicate on there that you will file, and then enter your tax information based on your 2019 W-2s or on any other type of documents that you have for 2019, or you will just have to file for 2019 again. So,
thank you.
All right, I guess mine, now reading the question, is more of a statement, and then we can move on. And I guess this has been part of your presentation, how to go over income tax questions when taxes are filed jointly.
Yeah, of course. So for income tax returns that are filed jointly, of course, you can indicate on the FAFSA that you filed married jointly. And then each FAFSA question, there is like a help link that will tell you exactly which line to go to on your income tax return in order to answer that specific question. So the FAFSA does guide you as far as which specific information you need to enter for each question about your tax information.
Thank you.
So another question we have is, how much of your financial aid is based off your family's income?
Yeah, so with financial aid, when you're submitting the FAFSA, the family income is one of the biggest components as far as calculating your EFC. So when the Department of Education is calculating your EFC, they do take that family income into consideration as part of what they call their federal methodology formula that they use to generate an EFC. So it is a big part of your EFC that's calculated in order to award you federal financial aid.
Thank you.
All right, next question. What's the maximum you can receive?
The maximum amount of federal financial aid you can receive for a given academic year is up to your cost of attendance. Schools can only award you up to that cost of attendance that they calculate and not anymore as far as federal aid goes. However, if you receive, 30,000 scholarships, then they would have to award you all 30,000 of your scholarships. So it just depends.
Thank you.
All right, next question. What are qualifications that are eligible for financial aid / FAFSA?
Qualifications? Oh. Well, the main way that you can qualify for financial aid is by submitting the FAFSA. So as far as, okay, I'm kind of a little bit confused about the question. Can you repeat it?
Yeah, I mean, this was, what are the qualifications that are eligible for financial aid? So I guess maybe criteria that need to be met in order to receive financial aid?
Yeah, the main criteria just to receive financial aid is submitting the FAFSA. As far as the specific awards that you receive based on the information from the FAFSA, that'll depend on what EFC is calculated for you. That's how we determine the actual awards that you get. But to qualify for aid, you just need to submit the FAFSA first.
Now, I guess a follow-up question to that would be, the IRS, does their calculations and then reports it to the school, or, validates it and then reports it to the school. And then the school has their allotment of money. Then they can, based on the EFC, or am I getting it wrong?
So it's more of like when you're completing the FAFSA, you'll enter your information from the IRS. So your 2019 1040 tax return, you'll use that information. And then they'll use that information from the IRS and from your taxes to calculate an EFC for you. And then that EFC is used to determine the awards that you're eligible to receive. Does that make sense?
Yes. And I guess too, if you apply to UTA and you apply to University of Oklahoma, you could have two different EFCs based on what the school can give you, or is it still the same EFC?
The EFC will be the same. The awards will be different though, because the schools have their different ways that they award their students. So the EFC will still be the same, but the awards will be different.
Got it. Thank you.
So the next question we have is, explain the difference between the FAFSA and the TASFA. And I have a follow-up question.
Yeah, of course. So the FAFSA is mainly for students who are U.S. citizens or permanent residents. So, and the TASFA is student for non-citizens. So if you are an undocumented or you are DACA, then you would complete the TASFA. And you would have to have graduated from a Texas high school to be eligible for the TASFA. So any student who's not eligible for FAFSA would probably most likely be eligible for TASFA.
Thank you. And then there's a follow-up question, and it just asks if you could explain the benefit of this form to help students obtain scholarships that are not financial aid driven.
So for scholarships that are not related based on your financial need, the FAFSA, it won't be taken into consideration. However, when you're applying to scholarships and stuff, you can receive federal financial aid in addition to the scholarship that you receive that don't require your FAFSA. So that's why we always encourage you to submit both your FAFSA and your applications to different scholarships, because you can receive both. You can receive federal grant funding, federal student loans, and receive scholarships that you get from, whether it's through the school or through other outside donors. You can receive both. And that'll help with you minimizing the cost of your education. So both of those awards combined would be your will be your awards that you can receive to help pay for school.
Thank you.
This next question, how does it affect a family of twins? It was answered in the chat that they would each need to submit their own application. Is there anything else you'd add to that?
No, that's pretty much it. Each student will need to just submit their own separate FAFSA application and just enter their same parent information on both of their FAFSAs.
Yeah, did you say something about requiring a GPA for FAFSA?
Yeah, so as far as GPA goes, that is part of what is called satisfactory academic progress. So as an incoming freshman, when you're applying for aid as an incoming freshman, that's not taken into consideration because you don't have a satisfactory academic progress because they don't have an academic record for you. But after your first semester at the university and the second semester, that's when they'll start getting your academic record, and that's when satisfactory academic progress will start basically taking effect and being considered as far as whether or not you are eligible to receive financial aid.
Can you elaborate what that GPA is? A parent was asking.
Yeah, of course. So different schools have different GPA requirements. It's actually crazy in how much it varies. For example, here at UTA, for first year incoming students in their first semester, the minimum GPA is a 1.9 GPA. But if you go to a different school, some schools, their minimum GPA for a first year student is a 2.0 GPA. So you just have to contact each school and like ask them what their staff policies are because it does vary by each school.
And we just had another question come in. Does FAFSA ever get denied to people with poor or inconsistent grades? And I know you've kind of touched on that, but maybe you can elaborate on that a little bit more.
Yeah, of course. So let's say you started school and unfortunately, you received poor grades and you're not meeting that satisfactory academic progress, like that minimum 1.9 GPA or a minimum 2.0 GPA at the end of the semester, your school will notify you and let you know like, hey, you're not meeting our staff policy. And that's when you can submit an appeal and explain in your appeal, you can explain your specific situation and let them know, hey, this is what's been going on. And they will review your appeal and determine whether or not they can reinstate your financial aid so that you can continue receiving it. It is at the discretion of the financial aid counselor who's reviewing your appeal, unfortunately. So whether you are approved or denied, it just depends on who reads your specific circumstance. But if you do receive poor grades, it doesn't mean that you're never going to receive financial aid again. It just means that you will have to submit an appeal and explain your specific situation so that it can be reinstated.
And coming from as a part-time advisor, that is the truth. And you'll have to sign contracts to do it to make sure that your GPA comes back up above 2.0, whatever the standard is for the school. So there is a plan in place in order to receive the funding.
So another question we have is, what is EFC and W-2?
EFC and W-2. So the EFC, the expected family contribution, is what is calculated by the FAFSA. And your W-2 is one of the tax documents that you use to complete the FAFSA. So don't get those two mixed up. So when you're completing the FAFSA application, you will use your 2019 1040 and 2019 W-2s to complete that FAFSA application. And once that is done and you click submit and send it to the Department of Education, that is when they calculate an expected family contribution or EFC for you in order to determine your aid eligibility by the schools. So there are two different components of receiving federal aid.
Thank you.
All right, next question. What if a student is still 17 and hasn't registered for selective service?
Yeah, so in that case, they would be exempt until they turn 18 years old. So the school, they would just need to notify the school like, hey, I'm exempt from selective service, and the school will be able to waive that requirement until they turn 18, which is when they will have to register for selective service.
Thank you.
All right, next question. Do you know what Texas public schools require the FAFSA?
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Do you know what Texas public schools, I guess, colleges and universities require the FAFSA?
I would say most of them. I would say good, like, if not all of them, then most of them require the FAFSA.
Thank you.
Okay, next question. If your income is over 200,000, will your EFC be the full charge / no school contribution?
It just depends on the other information, not just your income, but also like your household size and all the other information that you input in the FAFSA, and then they'll use that to calculate your EFC. So your EFC, the specific number, unfortunately, I won't be able to tell you that without you submitting the FAFSA, but it'll just depend on your specific, situation and everything else that you input other than your income information. So.
Thank you.
Do high school grades, what about high school grades before becoming a college freshman? I guess maybe the way I interpret that question would be the impact of your rank and GPA. Does that have any bearing on your FAFSA? Maybe I interpret it that way.
Yeah, so as far as like rank and GPA, like for example, like the scholarship applications that when you submit your admissions and all of that, they may take that into consideration when you apply for scholarships. They can take your class rank and your GPA into consideration when they're awarding you that scholarship. But as far as receiving federal financial aid through FAFSA, we don't look at your high school rank or GPA. We go based on whether you are admitted into the university. So your high school rank and GPA is important as far as merit scholarships go.
Thanks. I think we're caught up on questions right this second. So hang tight.
I think there was one last one, and is the FAFSA application process all document-based, or is there a personal component like a college application?
Unfortunately, it is all document-based based on your 2019 tax information and your other like information about your family, but there's no like other component other than that. Like your specific, like if you're talking about explaining your specific situation, then there's not a component for that on your FAFSA.
But that would be where the special circumstances is correct, and that is the school, correct?
Yes. So the special circumstance form, you would send that to the specific schools that you send your FAFSA to, and they'll be able to review that specific situation that's not reflected on the FAFSA.
And where can they find this specific application at?
Yeah, of course. So at UTA here, it'll be on our financial aid website, which is uta.edu/FAO. But for other universities, it's usually also on their financial aid website. So most schools have a list of forms that they have on their website where they will list like their special circumstance appeal form and all the other forms that they require you to submit, like for example, for verification. So it just depends on the specific school where they have that form. I also encourage you to like email the school and see if you'll be eligible based on your specific situation to actually submit the special circumstance form, because unfortunately the special circumstance form does not apply in all cases. So you would want to make sure that it does apply in your specific situation so that you can increase your chances of having it approved versus, it being denied.
Another question that I get a lot from parents is, Due to COVID, is there any additional financial aid that sometimes can happen, or just anything additional because of COVID? Do you know anything?
Yeah, so this current academic year here at UTA, we did have additional funding based on the CARES Act for students who were affected by COVID. So we were able to award them additional grant funding. Unfortunately, that is dependent on Congress and the bills or acts that they pass in order for us to give you students additional funding. So it just depends on Congress, basically. If they pass another CARES Emergency Act type of legislation to award students more aid that's outside of federal financial aid, then yes, we can give that to you. But if they do not, then we won't have that funding available.
Another question that just came in, does community college require FAFSA?
Yes. Yes, they do. They require you to submit the FAFSA to award your financial aid. Yes.
Do you get charged to do your FAFSA?
No, you should never pay to do the FAFSA. It is a free application, so it's free for anyone who's applying.
Will the school that you go to, will they help you to fill out a financial aid, or do the parents and students have to use their school, their high school, to get help?
You can do both. So usually we can best help students who have already been admitted. So, but if you haven't been admitted to school, you can still reach out to the financial aid office and see if they can answer your questions. After you have been admitted, then yes, we can still continue to help you submit the FAFSA, especially like this current 2021-2022 year. We have a lot of returning students asking for help with the FAFSA, and we are able to provide that help. So yes, your school that you apply to can help you fill out the FAFSA application.
Mania, I've just put the link in for the FSA ID. Could you please explain why the FSA ID, why creating one is so important and helpful in the FAFSA process?
Yeah, of course. So now the FAFSA, it is an electronic process. So the FSA ID allows you to electronically sign your FAFSA. So when you create an FSA ID, it is both your login to the FAFSA and your ability to sign and just say, hey, I approve of this FAFSA, and submit it to the Department of Education. Essentially, you can't submit a FAFSA without an FSA ID. So that is the first step to applying for financial aid.
Thank you.
And we just had another question come in, and the question is, should I apply to both FAFSA and TESFA?
I would say no, don't apply to both, because you can only be eligible for one. You can either only be eligible for TASFA or FAFSA. You can't be eligible for both. So if you are eligible for FAFSA, go ahead and submit the FAFSA, because that is how you can get the most type of funding to help pay for your school. Versus the TASFA, it is limited to grant funding, and the amount of schools that accept the TASFA are also limited. So if you are eligible for the FAFSA, submit the FAFSA.
Thank you.
Another question, can FAFSA be submitted for spring applications?
Yes, you can submit the FAFSA for spring 2022 if you're attending, or spring 2021. Any spring semester that you're attending, you can submit the FAFSA for that semester. The FAFSA is actually, for each academic year, it is available from October 1st all the way until June 30th of the next year. So for this current 2021-2022 FAFSA, it's available from October 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2021. So anytime between that timeline, you can submit the FAFSA to your schools.
Do you have to fill out the FAFSA every year and the TASFA as well?
Yes, you have to fill out all of the TASFA and FAFSAs every single academic year because each FAFSA or TASFA year is based on a different tax year. So you have to submit it every single year.
And there was a question about, can we get a copy of this presentation? Sorry, my computer's lagging a bit, but yes, this will be posted on the Keller ISD CCMR website for you to review.
Mania, should you do your FAFSA right in October, or can you wait till January or even August to do your FAFSA?
Yeah, of course. So ideally, we recommend you do it in October. That is like the best case scenario. But if for some reason you won't be able to do it until later, you can wait until January, which is before you. I would recommend doing it before January 15th, which is the priority deadline, so you can be considered for the maximum amount of grant funding. You can submit it after January 15th. Just keep in mind that the amount of grant funding that you'll receive might be less than what you are actually eligible for. So it might not be the maximum amount. And unfortunately, with the FAFSA, you won't be able to submit it in August because it depends on the academic year that you're submitting it for. So beginning in August, that'll be for like a different academic year.
All right, another question that just came in, is FAFSA weighed when you apply for scholarships?
Is FAFSA weighed? I'm sorry.
I think like, do they take FAFSA into consideration when you're applying for scholarships as well?
It depends on the scholarship. If it's a need-based scholarship, then FAFSA is taken into consideration. But if it's just like a regular merit-based scholarship, then FAFSA is most likely not taken into consideration. You would just have to read the scholarship application to see if they are a need-based scholarship. Then that's how you know that FAFSA is taking into consideration.
To kind of piggyback on that, if they know that you're getting a certain amount from FAFSA, does that affect the scholarships that you get?
So when we're awarding students, we do take scholarship amounts into consideration. So when it comes to scholarships, we always consider that as like better for the student than aid from FAFSA. So we would never reduce your scholarships. If you're receiving more in scholarships, we would adjust your aid from like your grant funding or your federal funding. We would adjust that first. Like we wouldn't adjust the amount of your scholarship, but the amount of scholarships you receive is taken into consideration when we're awarding you federal financial aid. So your grant funding might be reduced based on how much scholarship that you receive.
Thank you.
All right. Next question, is UTA the only presentation? I guess we've partnered with UTA to do the financial aid presentation. But there's another one for TAFSA, right, coming up, and then, or 2 financial aid nights and then 1 TAFSA, or would we?
Right, so tomorrow night we'll have a presentation for TASFA, and that's for all students who are not eligible for the FAFSA, which I think they have already kind of gone over the qualifications for each of those. But you can also go to College for All Texans and on that website, which we've already posted in the chat, and I'm happy to paste that one again to see what the qualifications are for each of those. But yes, we also partner. We appreciate UTA coming tonight. A lot of the things that apply to UTA and the FAFSA requirements and everything are federal guidelines, not just that don't just apply to UTA, but most any college or university in Texas. And so what you're hearing tonight is there are some specific things that they've discussed about UTA tonight, but a lot of them apply to any college in Texas. So, but we do also partner with UNT and TCC. And so we hope to have some other people come and present, not that we, have favorites or anything like that, but tonight was UTA's turn, and tomorrow night they'll be presenting for us again on TASFA, and we do appreciate them coming. But anyway, so, and if you're wondering if you have a specific college in mind, you can always go to that specific college or university's website on their financial aid page and see if they can get your questions answered on their specific web page, if you want some college or university specific questions answered.
And to piggyback on that, the process is still the same. You still have to get your FSA ID and you still have to complete the FAFSA, and then you talk to that specific university or college that you're looking at.
Absolutely.
And so we have another question that just came in, and it is about how long after applying for FAFSA will you be notified of funding acceptance?
So it'll depend on the specific school. So as far as after you submit the FAFSA here to UTA, it'll take us about a week to receive and process the FAFSA, but we don't begin our awarding process, so awarding students, until around March or April. So you won't know until March or April what type of funding that you're going to receive, as far as financial aid goes. But some schools do have different awarding ones where they award financial aid. So you'll just have to check with a specific school when they'll start sending out these financial aid notifications to students.
Thank you.
So I've put the links in a couple of times for FSA ID as well as the FAFSA document. And so the questions have kind of slowed down a little bit, but we're going to hang out, until, we've got quite a bit of time left here. So we are more than happy if you decide that you want to log on and start the FAFSA application and you have questions as you go. We are more than happy to hang out and answer those questions as you go. We've just had another question come in, Mania. It says, what is a PLUS loan?
Yeah, so for undergraduate students, the PLUS loan, specifically for parents, this is for where your parents can take out a loan in order to help you pay for your education. So the Parent Plus loan is a credit-based application. So your parent will have to go to studentaid.gov and actually submit an application for the Parent Plus loan. And the U.S. Department of Education will do a credit check. And then if your parent's credit is approved, then they will be eligible to receive that Parent Plus loan. However, if it's denied, then they won't be eligible for it. If your parents are denied, they can either get an endorser to basically make them eligible to get the loan. However, if the denial remains, you can be eligible for more unsubsidized loan. So it's just another way for your parents to help you basically pay for your education by taking out a loan on your behalf. And the Parent Plus loan does have a higher interest rate, and it's similar to the unsubsidized loan where you have to start paying as soon as you, the interest accrues as soon as you pay the loan, but it can be deferred until after you graduate. So your parents don't have to start paying on the Parent Plus loan until 6 months after you graduate. So essentially, it is your parents taking out a loan on your behalf.
Another question just came in. Could you explain more about the parent's contribution versus the student's contribution?
Yeah, so when they're calculating the expected family contribution, the parent contribution is based on the parent tax information. So your income, your assets, and all of that other information that it asks you to put in on the FAFSA, that'll determine the parent contribution. For student contribution, that'll be like whether your student works. So if your student had a job and they have a 1040 for 2019, then they will enter their 2019 tax information, and that'll be towards their student contribution. And that information combined is what will result in the expected family contribution.
We've had another question come in that says, will the FAFSA take the gross pay or net pay from 1040, and will debt like mortgage, cars, etc. be a factor?
So the FAFSA takes into consideration when you're filling it out, it'll ask you for your adjusted gross income, not your net income. So based on the 2019 tax 1040 tax return, it asks you for the adjusted gross income, and it's not going to take into consideration like your cars and stuff like that, but it'll take into consideration like your other assets or investments that you might also have. So not necessarily like your cars or your mortgage or and like that type of information.
So I've just posted in the chat some how-to videos that are found on how to help with the FAFSA in case anyone's working on it later when this presentation is over and you just need a quick spot check or something like that. And so there's some how-to videos to help with the FAFSA, and I've just posted that link in the chat box if anyone wants to access that sometime. And remember that this presentation is going to be on our Keller ISD CCMR YouTube channel, as well as our CCMR webpage. And so you'll always be able to go back and access answers to any of these questions, the presentation that Mania has presented to us tonight, and any of these links will also be there for future reference. And the Q&A document that we're going to try to get together and send out to everyone who is registered using that Google form, so that if we have your email address, we'll be sending that out to everyone.
Okay, everyone, so I'm sharing my screen and seeing if we can just play the presentation, and I'll just go through it again so you guys can read through the slides. If you have any questions, of course, you can ask the questions and I'll be more than happy to answer it. Mhm.
just had another question come in. Says, even if your family is in a wage bracket that they will not be granted any money, colleges still require FAFSA for you to apply.
You don't have to submit the FAFSA to apply to the school. However, the thing with the FAFSA is not required to submit your admissions application to the school. The FAFSA is mainly for just awarding federal financial aid. So you can still apply to all the schools that you want to without submitting the FAFSA. However, again, we do encourage the students submit it just to make sure that they don't miss out on any federal funding that they may be eligible to receive. But again, you don't need to submit the FAFSA in order to apply for admissions to any university.
Mania, isn't it true that some schools, even before they reward a scholarship, will require to have a FAFSA on file from a student?
Yes, so it depends on the school. Some do require you to have a FAFSA for their scholarship programs, and some of them don't. So always follow up with the school to see what kind of requirements they have for their scholarships, because some may require you to submit the FAFSA before they can consider you for their scholarship programs. Yes.
It looks like we have another question coming in. It says, I applied for the FSA ID on October 11 and have not gotten any ID. Have been getting emails telling me my children have not applied for FAFSA. So could someone please speak to that process? Because I thought that it was a pretty quick turnaround, correct?
Yeah, of course. So if you're getting messages that your children haven't applied for the FAFSA, we always tell parents and students first to make sure that your student, they created their own FSA ID and password, and they applied for the FAFSA using that FSA ID and password. As the parent, your FSA ID and password would just be to sign the FAFSA with your student. But student would need to use their own FSA ID and password to actually log into the FAFSA.
We have another question coming in. I have a son who is 17 years old now. Should he be filling out the form, or should I as the parent? He is also watching this program. Do you have to be 18 to fill out the form, he asked.
No, you don't have to be 18 to complete the form. You and your student can fill out the form together, because there is, of course, a parent section, so you can help your student with completing the FAFSA. But as a 17-year-old, he can still create his FSA ID and password and also complete the FAFSA.
I'm going to ask a follow-up question. Say I'm 20 years old, maybe 21 years old, finishing up my, senior year. Do I still have to complete the FAFSA with my parent, or do I do it by myself?
Yes, so for the purposes of the FAFSA, you will need to enter your parent information unless you can answer no to one of the dependency questions. So if you're under 24 years old, you're not considered homeless, you're not under legal guardianship, and you don't have any other extenuating circumstances that will make you an independent student, you will need to enter your parents' tax information on the FAFSA.
So kind of piggybacking on that question, what happens if a parent won't give the student their parent information to fill out their financial aid? Can anything be done?
Of course. So unfortunately, if a parent is not willing or able to provide their tax information, there's really not much we can do as far as awarding this dependent student federal financial aid. So if based on the dependency questions, you have to enter your parents' information and they're not willing to provide it, we won't be able to award you any federal or state financial aid. So it's important for parents to understand that this is how their students are considered for this funding. And if they don't provide their information, the only type of funding that the student may be eligible for is an unsubsidized loan. However, that'll depend on the specific school that they're applying to, and that school will have to approve whether or not they can receive that unsubsidized loan, which is a very small amount compared to what they can receive if the parent enters their tax information. So there is a chance, but it depends on the school. And oftentimes the parent will need to sign a form stating that they refuse to provide their tax information before the student can actually be considered for financial aid.
Mania, did you touch base on what if the student is a US citizen or a resident, but their parents are not? Can they still fill out the FAFSA or do they have to fill out the TASFA?
Yeah, of course. So if your parent is not a US citizen or a US resident, you can still complete the FAFSA as long as you are a US citizen, a resident, a permanent resident, or an eligible non-citizen. The FAFSA doesn't ask for the citizenship status of your parents. So when you're completing the FAFSA for your parents, you'll need to enter, as far as their social security number goes, you'll enter all zeros if they do not have a social security number here in the US. And also you will have to enter as far as their tax information goes, it will need to be based on the taxes that they file in their home country. So since they won't be able to, if they're not filing taxes here in the US, then we won't be able to get like a tax return for them. So you would enter that they did not file, and you will not be able to enter that tax information for your parents. But most likely the school will request for you to provide your parents' tax information, like based on the country where they file their taxes. But yes, you can still submit the FAFSA, yes.
What about if my parents don't file an income tax? Can I still do my FAFSA?
You can still do your FAFSA, but it'll depend on you can indicate for your parents on the FAFSA that they did not file, they will not file, but it'll depend on the specific reason why they're not filing their income tax. So if they're like retired, then they won't have to file, or maybe they just receive Social Security benefits, then they may not have to file, but it'll depend on the specific reason why they didn't file taxes. And if they are required to file, then that also increases your chances of being selected for verification. So if you report an income for your parents and indicate that they did not file taxes, that may be one of the reasons why you are flagged for verification. And then the school that you apply to will request their tax information, or they might even request that your parents file taxes before they can process your FAFSA application. So it depends on the specific reason why they did not file taxes.
What if I decide I don't want to go to school right now, but then at the last minute, I decide I want to go to school? Is it too late for me to do my FAFSA? Or say I don't want to go till next semester, till January. Can I still do that one, or will I have to do next year's?
So you can still submit the FAFSA even if you decide not to go in the fall semester or the spring semester. It'll just depend on which semester you are starting your school year. If you're starting your school year in the fall the spring of 2022, then you'll need to submit that 2021-2022 FAFSA. But if you're starting the following fall semester, like fall 2022, then you'll need to submit a different FAFSA. So always check with the school that you're applying to and just let them know, hey, I'm planning on applying to your university for this specific semester. Which FAFSA do I need to submit? Because it can get pretty confusing, especially right now where we have 2 aid years coming on at the same time. It is confusing which FAFSA you need to submit. So it depends on the specific semester you are applying to. So always check with the school and they will let you know which specific FAFSA that they need to award you. But yes, you can still apply for the FAFSA regardless of which semester that you're going to be starting it. Just make sure that it is the correct FAFSA that you are submitting.
Okay, another question. What if my parents were married when they filed their taxes, but they're no longer married now? Do I still file it with both of them together?
Okay, so it'll depend on, so the marital status of your parents is on the FAFSA as of based on the date that you are applying. So based on the date that you're sitting down and completing their FAFSA, if they're no longer together, then you will indicate that on the FAFSA. And then you'll provide the information for the parent who you live with most in the past 12 months or provided the most financial support that for you for the past 12 months. That is the information for the parent that you will enter. So if that parent is married or is remarried, then you will need to also enter their new spouse's tax information too.
What if the student lives with their grandparents or maybe an aunt and uncle and they file them on their taxes? Do I still have to get my parents' information?
Yes, so unfortunately, you won't be able to provide the information from your aunt or uncle or grandparents unless they adopt you. So if they're not your adoptive parents, then you will need to provide your biological parents' tax information. And in the case that you cannot provide the biological parents' tax information, then you can still submit your FAFSA to the school. However, they will require you to submit additional documentation to show that you're either estranged from your parents or some type of extenuating circumstance where you cannot provide your parents' information. And through that process, which is generally called a dependency change request, you won't need to provide your parents' information and they can process your FAFSA as an independent student where only your tax information is considered if you are no longer in contact with your parents or have any other extenuating circumstances where you cannot provide their information. And for this process, it is reviewed by a financial aid counselor, and you might be required to provide additional documentation to prove that the reason why you're not able to provide your parents' information. So there is another way if you aren't able to provide your biological parents' tax information.
So Mania, it looks like that's the end of your presentation loop, and it looks like we are almost at the end of our time together. I believe that the questions have stopped coming in, and so I want to put our contact information up there tonight. So I hope that everyone can see that. Our contact information for all of our CCMR coaches are up there. Before we go, I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. We hope that you found the information helpful. And we also especially want to thank everyone from UTA for their presentation and their help tonight. Mania, we've gotten so many compliments on how helpful you have been, and we do appreciate you and our mentors and Sandra and everyone for coming out tonight and joining us. Please remember, everyone, that you can reach out to any of the CCMR coaches on your high school campus at any time for help with your FAFSA or any financial aid questions that you have, and their contact information is listed on the screen now. I also want to thank Mr. Colvin from Keller High School, Ms. Hernandez from Timber Creek, and Mr. Higgins from Fossil Ridge for being with us tonight. And thank you again, everyone, for attending, and we hope that you have a great evening.
Thank you, Marcia.